For a specific person, death is a bottomless black hole, and it is difficult to face it at any time. However, if you magnify the space, you will be relieved immediately. As the people in one village say, what day will there be no death? Chairman Mao Zedong said it well. He taught us the case of death happens. Comrade Stalin put it better when he talked about the fallen soldiers. Death is a statistic. A statistic. It is. Sanya died. And there was one more grave bump in one village's mass grave, and there was nothing else. Sanya's fate is not good, really bad. It's been like that when she was alive. Let's not talk about it anymore. Since dead, it stands to reason that not to have any issue. But her funeral was not decent at all. Not even having the appearance of a funeral, but was full of joy. The time for the funeral was in the afternoon. Everyone was very sad and gathered around Sanya's body, talking about her well. Who would have imagined that one village would be lively? Before Sanya's body was buried, chickens, ducks, geese, dogs, cats, pigs, horses, mules, cows, sheep, rabbits, donkeys, and mice in one village were dispatched all at once, lively. In fact, there was science. There was science early in the morning, and no one paid attention. Those hens were the first to cheer in the early morning. They didn't lay eggs, but they were like women who gave birth to twins, screaming and acting like a spoiled child. And those roosters were even more ridiculous. They took themselves as eagles for no reason, trying to soar between the blue sky and white clouds. Their dumb wings were extremely hard. They wanted to fly, but couldn't fly high. They jumped from the ground to the fence, then jumped from the fence to the roof, and then jumped from the roof to the top of the tree. They were on the top of the tree like huge and strange birds. Chickens fly as soon as dogs jump. This goes without saying. The dogs jumped, and the movement became louder. Those flying in the sky, walking on the ground, and swimming in the water were all dispatched. They were majestic, with their necks outstretched and their chests erected, using their mouths as weapons, and graciously died against the danger-free front. They had no hatred, but were filled with righteous indignation, as if the truth lies ahead, waiting for them to swear their allegiance to the death. They soared, roared, and united as one and tough, and those domestic animals and beasts were obviously encouraged, and in the end they freed their hooves, bared their teeth, and grinned, looking like they were in estrus, and they couldn't stand it. All were eager to mate. However, when they broke free from the reins, and the male and the female looked at each other, they were stunned. Their watery eyes utterly bewildered. They had no lust. The male had no erection, and the female had no redness. What to do? They didn't know. They could only shout, could only jump. They were suffering alive, like living widows. Sanya's body was brought out under such a messy scene. The unexpected bigger things were still to come. The fish and shrimp in the water were also tossed. At first, the water surface was good, as smooth as a mirror, and occasionally there were only 1 or 2 splashes of water. The next time was different. The water splashes were getting more and bigger. When people walked to the river, they were shocked. The water on the bank was full of fish mouths, white and black, opening and closing as if the water ghosts were calling. And shrimp. Their blue-black backs were clinging to the surface of the water. Their heads were always facing the riverbank, and their long whiskers were floating there, so densely packed that it gave people goosebumps. And many big fishes actually floated to the surface. They lay down, their white belly flickered, and they had lost their strength and their mysterious, graceful, and dignified postures. They're fishes! Someone jumped into the water. The example of the role model was thoroughly reflected, and more people jumped into the water. By this time, not only the poultry, livestock, fish, and shrimp in the water have gone mad, but people have also gone mad. The news was quickly passed on to the funeral procession. Some people caught fish and some caught shrimp. It was not an exaggeration to say that good news was frequent. When the good news came, the funeral procession suddenly became noisy, lively, and relaxed, and more than half of it slipped away in a blink. By the end, it was almost gone. Where are they? In the river. This is extra money that fell from the sky. Wouldn't be too stupid to miss it. You must know that this is not distributed according to work, but distributed according to needs. And you can make as much as you want. No one expects communism has come true like this. Sadness was replaced by carp, silver carp, crucian carp, bream, catfish, and shrimp. People forgot that Sanya was to be buried. But taking it back, it can be just because of Sanya's funeral. Other people don't live. People were in a terribly good mood, especially children. At dusk, some fish floated up on the river, but people didn't want them anymore. Enough. The smoke from this evening's cooking is really charming, incomparably soft, and repeatedly willowy. As the night fell, the smell of breeze and steam spread, very fresh, floating in the kitchen, patio, pigsty, haystacks, Alice, and the edge of the sunset, shrouded one village. The grand fish and shrimp dinner began. People are eating fish. People rely on the delicate cooperation of lips and tongues to keep the fish meat in their mouth and pick the fish bones out. Just when every family was eating fish, the sound of a flute suddenly sounded in one village. After all, a flute is a flute. As the saying goes, play the flute when full and play the vertical flute when hungry, which breaks the difference between a flute and a vertical flute. The vertical flute is desolate. It turns 1,000 times, grief, resentment, unsatisfactory, and full of thoughts. It is a way for poor scholars who can get enough to complain and feel sorry for themselves. The flute is different. The flute is full, agitated, melodious, and has plenty of exhalation, reflecting the atmosphere of the fullness of food and drink. Echoing. Who wouldn't eat fish at such a time and ran out to play the flute? Of course, it was Wang Da-Gui. The breath and fingering are both here, and you can hear it. Wang Da-Gui was playing I Deliver Public Grain to the Commune. This music has its own difficulty. Not only the breath should be full, but also fingering is the key. And there are a lot of busy and heroic skips. Think about it. The food at home is too much to finish, and when the sun is shining, the fall atmosphere is obvious. It must be people who are hoarse and dancing, and it is not enough to explain the emotion without the skipping. That is country. Simple, honest, obsessive, unconditional love. Wang Da-Gui is blowing. Or, to put it more advanced, playing. He played as hard as he could, as hard as he could. He lost his voice several times because of his strong force. It is conceivable that his 10 fingers are like moths fluttering at the lamp at the moment, quivering. Wang Dagui must be sending his daughter with his music. He hopes that Sanya will work hard in the underworld and don't forget to send the public food. Since Dagui is working hard, just listen. It sounds good. While eating fish, enjoying the cool, and listening to the music, where is such a good day. Today is a good day. 1,000 years can't wait. Today and tomorrow are both good days. Catch up with the prosperous world and let's enjoy peace. Who would have thought that Wang village would be today? No one could have imagined it. Wang village is heaven. But Wang village is not paradise. Wang village is just Wang village. On that night, in the early hours of the morning, when everyone was still drooling and immersed in their sleep, the earth suddenly turned into water and began to fluctuate. The fluctuating earth was no longer as thick as it used to be, and suddenly it was terribly soft and squeamish, like the bellies of little sisters-in-law arching upwards with intoxication and dedication. This arch woke up Wang village. They immediately understood there was an earthquake. But just for a while, the intoxicating waves traveled along the surface of the earth to the distance, whoosh, to the unreachable place, and there was no trace of it. People rushed out the door, and many members picked up hoes and poles. They are waiting. When it comes again, they have to fight the earthquake for the last time. Come back if you have balls. And those farmers who slept too deep didn't feel the charming twist of the earth. They stood on the ground in black, with only regrets in their hearts. But they looked forward to it. Their greatest wish is that the earth can fluctuate again, and they just want to see how the earth arches up, desperately like little sisters-in-law's bellies. People lost sleep completely. In a dark night, they held on to rakes and hoes. They started discussing. Blind Wang has already appeared. How come Blind Wang is absent at such a time? Blind Wang walks around. For him, night and day are the same, but it is more convenient. Blind Wang expresses his authoritative views everywhere. Just when it was almost dawn, the Twitter suddenly rang, and Wu Manling's voice came from the wet early morning. Her voice was particularly loud in the mist vapor. Wu Manling's speech was not long, and the outline was drawn, Mei Lin expressing 3 things. The first was a warning. She warned Wang village's enemies not to act rashly at this time. It would be futile. The second was congratulations. Wu Manling enthusiastically told the comrades in Wang village that they had achieved a great victory in the battle against the earthquake. In the end, Wu Manling made a comprehensive outlook on the earthquake work from the perspective of the overall situation. She told the members of Wang village that it was from victory to victory. And who does the final victory belong to? Of course, it is Wang village. As always, what Wu Manling said most in the Twitter was actually just one thing, and that was victory. Wu Manling said this, obviously with the characteristics of Wang village. Talking in detail, Wang village may be the place in the world that is most obsessed with victory and eager to win. Wang village can have nothing and can give up everything, but it cannot be without victory. Victory is the lifeblood of Wang village. What to eat, what to wear, what to drink, all those things matter. In the face of victory, however, those things are secondary, as they are incidental. People want to eat, drink, and clothe. First of all, because victory is ahead. If you don't eat or drink, you won't get there. In the same way, you are not dignified to walk up to victory with your bare ass. What is victory? Victory is the result. Anyway, everything has a result, which means that in one village, everything can lead to victory. Because it has experienced too many victories, one village naturally showed a numb side in the face of victory. But this numbness is not ordinary numbness. It is the atmosphere in the bones with a magnificent bearing. Only then did one village know that the real earthquake was not one village, but a place called Tangshan. It was the Central People's Broadcasting Station and the Local People's Broadcasting Station simulcast program that told one village the news. The news from the central government brought the earthquake to a climax. In a sense, the news from the central government also brought the earthquake to an end. This matter has nothing to do with one village. But the next question is, where is Tangshan? This matter is nerve-wracking. No one in one village knows, not even Blind Wang. Blind Wang raised his head, raised his eyebrows desperately, looked into the distance with his non-existent eyes for a long time, and finally said this sentence with confidence. Far, very far. People in one village know that Tangshan is far. Tangshan is very far. Far is a good thing. In front of the earthquake, nothing is better than far. Far is safe. Far has the advantage that it is out of reach and becomes a dream. No pain, no itching. Who heard that dream pains? No. Who heard that dream itches? No. Far has the added benefit of giving facts a half-truth. Since it's a half-truth, why dig that out? Isn't that a fool's errand? One village forgot about Tangshan in the shortest time. Taking advantage of the crowd, they turned their mouth around, immediately shot back, and picked up Sanya again, talking about Sanya's character and Sanya's appearance. Of course, Sanya has gone to the ground, and there is actually nothing to say. What does Sanya look like? What does Sanya look like? This question entangled Duanfang. Duanfang recalled again and again that he remembered Sanya's separated legs, her restless belly, her raised breasts, her hot skin, and even her rapid breathing. Those were very clear. However, Duanfang's memory ended there. When to the part above her neck, Duanfang could no longer remember what Sanya looked like. The memory Sanya left to Duanfang was headless. He just couldn't remember Sanya's face. That face was so close to Duanfang that Duanfang just couldn't remember it. What does Sanya look like? This question almost drove Duanfang crazy. He can't remember at all. Duanfang thought hard, but memory is like this. When you exert force, you are far from the origin. Duanfang locked himself in the room and did not come out. The door was not fastened. However, no one dared to enter. Inside the door is a tiger. Don't provoke it. Whoever provokes it will be the first to be pounced on. Shen Cuizhen and Hong Fen had been standing in the main room with both hands empty, not knowing what to do. From the moment Sanya's body was dragged back, there had never been a trace of living in this family, and it was so cold that it looked like a dead person. Duanfang shut himself in the room for more than a day without eating or drinking. Shen Cuizhen pretended to be calm, while her heart was still not clean. Although Sanya's death has nothing to do with her, in the relationship between Sanya and Duanfang, she has built a dam after all. She still feels guilty in her heart, but dares not to say it. So she's anxious and waiting. She doesn't know what Duanfang is going to say to her. Wang Cunliang hovered on the patio for a long time between returning to the house. He glanced at the door, hesitating to say anything. In the end, he took out the cigarette pot and squatted down at the door. Wang Cunliang took a few sips at the cigarette pot with a sad face and whispered, "What's going on this year? You say, what's going on? What is it that can live with our family?" Hongfen didn't like hearing such words. She quickly took over Wang Cunliang's words and said, "Don't say anything if it doesn't go well. What's wrong with our family? What's the matter with our family?" Wang Cunliang took the cigarette pot from his mouth, poked it in the air, and said, "Sanya is just gone." Hongfen said, "Life is fortune, wealth is fate, it's none of our family's business." Wang Cunliang frowned and said, "Sanya is just gone." Hongfen said, "That's not what you said. Don't pick up everything at home. It's not a wallet." Wang Cunliang didn't want to talk to Hongfen, so he raised his head, looked at Shen Cuizhen, and said, "You are guilty. You just let them be together. How come things went like this?" Shen Cuizhen was most afraid of this sentence. Now, Wang Cunliang started this topic. How could Shen Cuizhen bear it? Just as she was about to speak, Hongfen spoke. Hongfen said, "I want to be fair about this. It's not her fault. Duanfang was born by her, and she disciplines her son so she doesn't offend anyone. According to me, it's the right way to turn your elbows in." Shen Cuizhen listened to all of Hongfen's words in her ears. If it were changed to normal, Shen Cuizhen would not actually like to hear these words. But today is different. It is rare that she is not confused on this issue and speaks for her. Shen Cuizhen's eyes became hot, and she was emotional. She went back to her room alone and closed the door. Shen Cuizhen sat on the edge of the bed, thinking of Sanya. Hot tears poured out one after another, and it was inconvenient to cry outly. She just put her hands on the bed frame and rubbed it back and forth. Tears were shed for a while, but when she heard the movement in the main room, Shen Cuizhen quickly wiped her eyes and went out of the room. Sure enough, Duanfang got up and stuck in the door frame, like an evil spirit. Duanfang stared at Kong Suzhen and walked up step by step. Shen Cuizhen was afraid. In fact, she has always been afraid of this son. Duanfang went straight to Shen Cuizhen, grabbed his mother's shoulder, and said, "Mom, what does Sanya look like? Tell me." This sentence is rude. Shen Cuizhen was even more afraid. She never thought her son would ask such a topic, dared not to speak. Duanfang put his arm on Hongfen's shoulder and begged, "Sister, tell me, what does Sanya look like?" Shen Cuizhen interjected and said, "Duanfang, Sanya looks quite beautiful." "I didn't ask if she was good-looking. I asked what she looked like." Hongfen is also afraid, took a step back. Duanfang didn't ask for the result. He put down Hongfen and sat on the threshold. Duanfang raised his head, looked at the sky, and said, "I just want to know what Sanya looks like." Shen Cuizhen was no longer afraid, But terrified, she came to Duanfang, stretched out her hand, and placed it on Duanfang's forehead. Duanfang took his eyes back from a distance, looked at his mother, and said, "I didn't pay attention before. It was the night when we met. I can't remember what Sanya looked like. Mom, your son is not confused. I just want to know what Sanya looks like." Duanfang's eyes were empty. There was a thin layer of tears in his eyes, but they did not fall. Shen Cuizhen looked at her son. Her heart was broken. Shen Cuizhen said, "Duanfang, Sanya is dead." "I know she's dead!" Duanfang stood up fiercely, pounding chest. No tears, but his saliva flowed out. Helplessness made Duanfang extremely furious. I just want to know, what exactly does Sanya look like?" On the morning of the next day, Shen Cuizhen met Kong Suzhen at the entrance of the alley. Shen Cuizhen wanted to ask Suzhen if she had any photos of Sanya at home. If she had, she would borrow it and show it to Duanfang. However, when they met, she couldn't say anything. Shen Cuizhen buried her head and just wanted to hide. Instead, Kong Suzhen stopped Shen Cuizhen. Kong Suzhen's eyes were particularly hard and bright, and there was no trace of the funeral at all, but she became small, as she lost a lot of weight, with her jacket and pants hanging from her body, empty. Shen Cuizhen knew that she could not escape, so she could only bite the bullet and walk up, not knowing how her legs got there. Kong Suzhen took Shen Cuizhen's hand, sighed, and said, "Sister, you don't have to be sad. Duanfang can be considered worthy of her. If Sanya were alive, it would be nonsense. It's not that I'm cruel as a mother. It's good being like this. It's still so good. It's clean. It's clean." Kong Suzhen was exceptionally calm when she said these words. Only her body was uneven and swaying. Shen Cuizhen worried that she would fall, stretched out her arms and supported her with both hands. Shen Cuizhen never thought that it was not Kong Suzhen falling, but herself. With tears in her eyes, Shen Cuizhen grabbed Kong Suzhen's arms tightly with both arms, screamed and slid down, sitting on the ground, and fainted. Duanfang has been dreaming. Dreams are always without sunlight and shrouded in a special color, even in wheat fields. Duanfang's dream is strange. Every time it starts from a wheat field and then spreads to a place with nowhere to go. The wind is blowing, the wheat is surging, every wheat is as tall as a reed, and every ear of wheat is as big as a reed flower, with white flowers rolling in the wind, desperately trying to lure something. They are extremely allure. With a sickle in hand, Duanfang got into the wheat field. As soon as he entered, the wind was calm. The waves were calm, and the overwhelming wheat was standing there, and the wheat grew bigger, at least as high as a locust tree. Duanfang actually went into the forest. Duanfang looked around. No one. He sighed and began to cut the wheat. It was only after such a scene that Duanfang noticed that he was not holding a sickle, but a saw. Duanfang started sawing. Well, a tomb blocked Duanfang. Sanya's figure suddenly flashed out from behind the tomb, and soon her waist was infinitely charming, which was a bit like a fox. Sanya's hair was hanging up, covering most of her face. She slanted and looked at Duanfang with one eye. Her eye was quite sad, but she laughed for no reason, laughing endlessly. Sanya walked all the way to Duanfang, stretched out her hand, hooked Duanfang's neck, raised her head, pouted her lips, and waited for him unforgivingly. Duanfang said, "It's not good here. There are mosquitoes." Sanya was naughty and said ruthlessly, "You are the mosquito." Duanfang got up and said, "How am I a mosquito?" Sanya said, "You are a mosquito, a poisonous mosquito." Duanfang said, "You say it again." Sanya said, "You are a poisonous mosquito." Duanfang grabbed Sanya in one hand, covered Sanya's mouth with his mouth, blocked Sanya's mouth with his tongue, and patronized Sanya's tongue. But unexpectedly, Sanya's tongue is not a tongue. It is made of raw candy. It will be smaller when sucking it, and it will be smaller while sucking it again. Duanfang felt distressed and was a little reluctant. He clutched Sanya's cheeks and said, "Look, I have eaten it. I'll save it for you." Sanya was a little vague and said, "It's useless to keep it. Eat it. I'm saving it for you." Duanfang then ate. After eating, Sanya's mouth opened. There was nothing in her mouth. It was empty. At this moment, Sanya suddenly remembered something and wanted to say something to Duanfang, but she couldn't say it anymore. She couldn't even say a word. Sanya was anxious and became extremely violent, not only dancing, but also her hair was disheveled. Duanfang was horrified. That shock woke up Duanfang. What does Sanya want to say to him? Duanfang thought. Duanfang couldn't think of it. After thinking about it, he went around Sanya's appearance again. What does Sanya look like? To find out Sanya's appearance, Duanfang almost went into madness. A crazy idea appeared. He was going to dig up Sanya's grave, open her coffin, and take a good look. This time, Duanfang did not hesitate. He stayed at home until dusk, took out a large shovel behind the door, carried it on his shoulder, and went out. Can't wait for dark. When it's dark, he can't see anything. When it was time to finish work, Duanfang didn't walk on the right path, and he must have been afraid of meeting people. The mass burial hill is located north of Wang village, which is relatively far away. It's a winding road with many turns. This is a must. This is an underworld, a road of no turn. If it is straight, wide, and huge, it will be unofficial. As long as you turn 7 or 8 corners, the ghosts can recognize you, and it is not so easy for them to return to Wang village. But Duanfang gave up this road, and he decided to paddle across the river in the north of the village, so he would never meet anyone. But Duanfang still miscalculated. Just as he was treading water with his trousers and a shovel up, Mr. Gu and his ducks turned a corner and ran into Duanfang head-on. At this time, the sun has just set, and the sunset was floating on the west side of the river. The entire stream was dyed red by the sun, a magnificent but bleak red, very demon. Because it was against the light, Mr. Gu and his ducks, who had just turned a corner, were not like on the water, but in a pool of blood. Duanfang felt that he was no longer treading water, but was bathing in blood. This feels weird, bloody, sticky, and creamy. There is also a panic that has nowhere to hide. Duanfang could have pierced with a slasher, but with something in his hand, the slasher couldn't be pierced. Duanfang wanted to go ashore earlier and leave this vast world of blood. Mr. Gu drew his small sampan over, and when he saw that it was Duanfang, he dragged Duanfang onto the small sampan. Mr. Gu said, "Duanfang, what are you busy with?" Duanfang squatted down with his bare buttocks, panting. Mr. Gu said, "Duanfang, your face is wrong. What are you busy with?" Duanfang thought for a while, raised his face, and suddenly asked Mr. Gu a question. "Mr. Gu, what does Sanya look like?" The problem came out of nowhere. Mr. Gu said, "It's all over. What are you doing?" Duanfang said, "I'll go see Sanya's appearance." Mr. Gu raised his head, looked at the mass graves in the distance, and then looked at Duanfang's shovel. His heart was clear. Mr. Gu said, "Let's go back." Mr. Gu said, "Let's talk about a person's appearance." Mr. Gu took Duanfang back to his hut, but he ignored him. He invited Duanfang to drink a meal of porridge, which was considered dinner. After drinking, he went to the river to take a cold bath, took out a bench, sat on the edge of the river, facing the wind on the river, and felt comfortable. Mr. Gu and Duanfang just sat there without speaking. But Duanfang knew that Mr. Gu could speak, and he promised Duanfang to talk to him about a person's appearance. The night was slowly getting darker, and the moon couldn't hold it any longer, so it rose. It is a crescent moon. The crescent moon is a ghostly thing. Its light is graceful, both clear and vague. There is no color, only indeterminate black and indeterminate white. The water in the river is illuminated, wrinkled, and looks old and dreamy. Duanfang has no idea how long he has been sitting here and is a little anxious. Duanfang said, "Mr. Gu, you said you wanted to talk to me." Mr. Gu seemed to remember and said, "Yes." Mr. Gu stood up and returned to the thatched hut. He came out again with a few books in his hand. Mr. Gu handed the books to Duanfang and said, "Duanfang, take them back and read them carefully." Duanfang pushed the books back stubbornly and said, "Mr. Gu, what I want to know is what Sanya looks like." Mr. Gu said, "Sanya has lost her looks." Duanfang said, "How can Sanya not have a look?" Mr. Gu said, "She is dead." Duanfang said, "She is dead, but she has a look. There must be." Mr. Gu was disappointed and said, "Duanfang, do you know what death is?" Duanfang was stunned and shook his head. "Death means nothing." Mr. Gu said, "Death means nothing." Duanfang said, "She has it!" Mr. Gu said, "A thorough materialist would not agree with your statement. If the skin does not exist, what will the hair be attached to? The person is dead, and the material is gone. How come there's a look?" Duanfang stopped talking and turned his face away, looking at the water in the distance. When he turned around, Mr. Gu unexpectedly discovered that there were two reflections of the moon on Duanfang's cheeks, which were tears. They were cold but bright, like two knives slashing into Duanfang's face, leaving only the back of the knives. Mr. Gu said, "Duanfang, tears are shameful." Duanfang didn't even know he was crying. From the day he came to Wang village, Duanfang never shed a tear, even when Sanya was dying. He doesn't cry in Wang village. He doesn't believe in Wang village. Duanfang wanted to wipe it. However, it can be wiped clean. How paranoid the tears are, how crazy. They popped out of the sockets, almost gushing. Duanfang said, "I'm afraid. I'm actually afraid." Mr. Gu said, "What are you afraid of?" Duanfang said, "I don't know. I'm just afraid. Mr. Gu thought for a while, handed the books to Duanfang again, and said, Duanfang, you have to study hard and reform well. This sentence came suddenly. Duanfang was puzzled and asked, What am I reforming? Mr. Gu said firmly, Worldview. Duanfang said, What do you mean? Mr. Gu straightened up and spoke more slowly. Mr. Gu was a little sad and said, You are not a complete materialist. A complete materialist does not believe in tears. Tears are shameful. Complete materialists are not afraid. We fear nothing. Mr. Gu said, People are born with a negation. When they die, they have negated negation. Death is not a good thing. In summary, it is not a bad thing. It proves that thorough materialism is scientific. Mr. Gu said, To live is to live. To have, to exist, and to die is to die or not to have, or not to exist. This is exactly what we humans are. Living, dying, living again, dying again. Like that cycle, like that back and forth, like that negation of the negation, like that spiraling forward. We've all grown in such great strides for 5,000 years. What are you afraid of? Mr. Gu said, We must continue to develop in such big strides for another 5,000 years. What are you afraid of? Mr. Gu said, Complete materialists don't have such doubts, such hesitation, such sorrow, sadness, and melancholy, such hero's depression, and such children's emotion. When we die, we will not go to paradise or heaven. When we die, we are just a handful of soil. A fallen angel is not a ruthless thing, but a spring mud that protects the flower. This flower is not a rose or a rosa of talent and beauty, a peony or pioneer, but a cotton, sorghum, rice, soybean, wheat, and corn. Are you afraid of soybeans? Are you afraid of corn? Mr. Gu said, Don't be afraid. No one can be afraid of something that doesn't exist at all. That's a mistake. Sanya doesn't exist. Sanya's appearance doesn't exist either. It's your hesitation that exists, and your cowardice. Mr. Gu said, I've talked too much. It's been 45 minutes. Duanfang, bring the shovel and go home and sleep. Duanfang had to admit that he liked Mr. Gu's talk a little bit. His talk was full of an open and galloping nature, especially large and unrestrained all the way to the sky. Duanfang also noticed that Mr. Gu has such a characteristic when he speaks. That is, he never says I, but we. Now, it's not Mr. Gu who is talking. He's just a representative. He represents a whole. There are thousands, tens of millions of people united as one, with the spirit of a chorus. This spirit has become a background and a foundation, solid. Duanfang looked at Mr. Gu carefully, and now Mr. Gu was sitting upright with no expressions on his face. Duanfang was surprised to find that Mr. Gu was very hard this night. Under the moonlight, he looked like a chair, made of wood, made of iron. Mr. Gu has an air of invulnerability. Duanfang believed that, in Mr. Gu's eyes, he was definitely not Duanfang, but also a chair made of wood, made of iron, face to face put together. There are two empty chairs in which Fearless sits. Duanfang suddenly realized that thorough materialism is really good. It's good to be the word complete. It's ruthless.